welcome back to EDH Deck Building. I am your host, Demo, and these are 20 cards from last year that I really liked a whole lot, but not a lot of other people did. I came up with the idea for this video because I came across a couple of cards through my travels that I talked about in my best cards from certain sets last year, and saw on EDH Rec that they just were not in a lot of decks at all. Now, there is, of course, an addendum here. I realize we got a whole ton of cards last year, which is another reason why I'm making this video. It's a bit of a reminder. I did my video of 20 cards that I missed last year that sort of flew under the radar for me because we got so much content, and a lot of people mentioned in that video and also in my best cards of the year video that they totally forgot about those cards. So these are cards that I talked about last year that I think are really good, that maybe I'm trying to convince people that they are better than you might think, but also a reminder of, hey, here's a great card that came out last year that might have already got buried and you might have already forgot about it, and we're about to get a whole bunch more new cards as well. So I thought it would be a good time to do this before we do so. I stopped with Dominaria United though. I didn't do any of the really new sets, so like Warhammer 40k, Brothers War, Jumpstart, I guess Infinity as well. Just the sets from Neon Dynasty up to Dominaria United. A bunch of cards that I think are really good that aren't very popular in the format, at least not yet. So I'm going to start out at number 20, Sphinx of Clear Skies, 3 blue, Sphinx 5/5, Flying Ward 2, has Domain. Whenever Sphinx of Clear Skies deals combat damage to a player, reveal the top X cards of your library, where X the number of basic land types among lands you control. An opponent separates those cards into 2 piles. Put 1 pile into your hand and the other into your graveyard. I actually think this is a really good card in a lot of decks, and I think what puts people off of it is the Domain ability, because of course you want lots of different land types. So the thinking is, well, I only want to play this in like a 5-color deck, maybe a 4-color deck, right? But even just in a monocolored deck, I think this card's pretty good, because in a monocolored deck, this just becomes a 5/5 Flying Ward 2 creature that when it connects draws you a card. That's not bad, but even better in a 2-color deck, and of course most of the decks in the format are 2-color decks. This is, when it connects, you look at the top 2 cards of your library, you separate them into 2 piles, but you don't really care. You just pick whichever card you want to put in your hand and you put the other in your graveyard. And of course in a graveyard deck it's extra good, and that's where I think this card could see a lot more play, is like in a Dimir graveyard deck, because I connect with my Sphinx of Clear Skies, I look at the top 2 cards of my library, maybe I want one of them in my graveyard, the other one can go in my hand. The fact that your opponent is only looking at 2 cards here is actually an advantage for you, because I just throw one in my graveyard that I want there, and the other one I can just put in my hand. I think it is a really good fit in a lot of graveyard decks. Currently only in 571 decks on EDH Rec. Essentially that's nothing, right? Coming in at number 19, Fraying Line, 4 mana artifact. When Fraying Line enters the battlefield, put a rope counter on target creature you control. At the beginning of each player's upkeep, that player pays 2. If they do, they put a rope counter on a creature they control. Otherwise, exile Fraying Line and each creature without a rope counter on it. Then remove all rope counters from all creatures. I just think this is a really fun, interesting card. I know it might not fit in a particular deck. It is essentially a colorless board wipe that also is exiling. That's what I really like about it. It's currently only in 1,200 decks on EDH Rec. Again, that's almost nothing. There are particular themes that it will fit in, but what I really like about it is, first of all, it's just a fun, interesting sort of politics card in a commander game, but it is also a colorless board wipe option for certain colors that don't have a lot of options there. Coming in at number 18, Forge Boss, 2 black and a red, Human Warrior 3/4. Whenever you sacrifice one or more other creatures, Forge Boss deals 2 damage to each opponent. This ability triggers only once each turn. This is a card that I thought for sure was going to slot into so many decks out there. Any black and red deck that is sacrificing creatures, I'm sure there's a bunch of them. Every time you sacrifice another creature, even those token creatures, you're dealing 2 damage to each of your opponents. That's a fantastic way to win in any of those decks. This is only in 972 decks currently on EDH Rec, less than 1,000. I thought for sure this would be one of those cards that people would immediately slot into those decks that they already have that are doing this. There's got to be a lot of those, right? Really shocked this guy's not in more decks. Coming in at number 17, Scheming Fence, white and a blue, Human Citizen 2/3. As it enters the battlefield, you may choose a non-land permanent. Activated abilities of the chosen permanent can't be activated. Scheming Fence has all activated abilities of the chosen permanent except for loyalty abilities. You may spend mana as though or mana of any color to activate those abilities. So this is currently in 3,500 decks on EDH Rec. That's pretty good. I tried to keep it under 4,000 2,000 decks with all of these cards, because that to me means it's a card that's not really getting played a whole bunch. I know this is a 2-color card, so that's going to limit the amount of decks it can go in, but this is one of those cards that I think you could put in any deck. I just talked about this in my Azorius Staples video, because you could put this in any Azorius deck and it's going to do a lot of work for you. Just the ability of being able to shut off a permanent of your opponent's is great. Doesn't work on lands, but anything else. You got an artifact, a creature, an enchantment, and yes, even a planeswalker. I know it says you don't get the loyalty abilities, but that doesn't mean you can't shut it off. If your opponent has a really annoying planeswalker that is a non-land permanent, you can shut off the activated abilities of that planeswalker, which of course loyalty abilities are. You don't get the bonus, but you still get that shut off effect. So just being able to 2 mana shut off one of my opponent's very powerful activated abilities is great, but then also I get it as well is pretty darn interesting, and this card I think could fit in a lot more decks. Coming in at number 16, one of my favorite board wipes from last year, Hostile Takeover, 2 blue, black and a red, sorcery. Up to 1 target creature has base power and toughness 1/1. Up to 1 target creature has base power and toughness 4/4 until end of turn. Then Hostile Takeover deals 3 damage to each creature. I really like this as a board wipe. I mean, 5 mana is kind of a lot for a board wipe, I guess, but what I really love about it is I find the creature on the battlefield that I want to get rid of that this normally wouldn't hit, obviously, right? 3 damage is going to hit all those creatures with toughness 3 or less, but if my opponent's got a Vorinclex or a big creature in play, I can turn that into a 1/1, and now that's going to die as well. This basically becomes a sweeper for all the small creatures, but I get to choose a big creature that it also hits, and I get to save a creature of mine that doesn't get killed by it, right? So if I have a 1/1 creature on the battlefield that I want to keep around, I turn it into a 4/4, and now it's going to survive. I really, really like this. It's only in 521 decks. I know it's a 3-color spell, and there's lots of other great board wipes in Grixis colors, but for me, this is one that I would love to find room for if I was making a Grixis deck. Coming in at number 15, Mirror of Life Trapping, 4 mana artifact. Whenever a creature enters the battlefield, if it was cast, exile it. Then return all other permanent cards exiled with Mirror of Life Trapping to the battlefield under their owner's control. Again, a colorless card, so it can fit in any deck. Only 1,400 decks this is in currently on EDH Rec, and I just think this is a phenomenal fit, particularly in a blink strategy. The important wording here is this triggers when that creature enters the battlefield. So if I have an Eternal Witness, for example, I cast it, it enters the battlefield, I'm gonna get the ETB off my Eternal Witness, and then this will trigger and exile it so that when the next creature gets cast, now my Eternal Witness comes back and I get that ETB effect again. This is a phenomenal fit in an ETB strategy, particularly good in any strategy where you're not in those particular blinking colors. Like I would probably say white and blue are probably the best at that. If you're in any deck where you have a commander with a enter the battlefield or leaves the battlefield trigger, this is a great fit if you don't have a lot of blinking options. Coming in at number 14, Temporary Lockdown, 1 white enchantment. When Temporary Lockdown enters the battlefield, exile each non-land permanent with mana value 2 or less until Temporary Lockdown leaves the battlefield. Currently in only 839 decks. Again, that's essentially nothing, and I really think this is a great card. I don't know if it necessarily fits in any specific strategy. It is just a great card for solving a lot of problems. And what this card I think does better than almost any other card is hate on token strategies, right? Because of course, all those tokens are going to be mana value 2 or less. Typically, they're always 0. So this is 3 mana, exile all tokens, and of course, they're not coming back. So all those creature tokens are gone. All those treasure tokens are gone. This is just a fantastic card for hating on any of your opponents that are in those strategies. I think this card definitely could fit in a lot more decks. Coming in at number 13, Activated Sleeper, 2 and a black Phyrexian Shapeshifter, 0/0 with Flash. You may have Activated Sleeper enter the battlefield as a copy of any creature card in a graveyard that was put there from the battlefield this turn, except it's a Phyrexian in addition to its other types. Really fun, interesting card in a commander game. I always love creatures with Flash because, of course, you can flash them out whenever you want, whenever the opportunity is most advantageous for you. This is currently only in a little over 1,700 decks on EDH Rec, and it's just a fun, interesting clone effect. We don't really have any clone effects in mono black. That's why I thought this card would be a lot more popular and why I put it on my list of the best cards from this set, because having cards that are specifically doing things in certain colors, of course, is always going to be important in the Commander format. This is a black clone option. Flash it out at any time after a board wipe has been cast. Copy the best creature that was just killed. It can be one that you want, right? If you have a really important creature in your deck other than your commander, you can flash this out to copy that creature if your opponents end up killing it, right? It doesn't even have to be a board wipe. Just your opponent kills your creature that you really, really want. You flash this out and copy it. I think it's a fantastic clone effect in the commander format. Coming in at number 12, Mana Cannons. 2 and a red enchantment. Whenever you cast a multicolored spell, Mana Cannons deals X damage to any target, where X is the number of colors that spell is. So again, this is another card that I thought was going to go in a lot more decks. It is in almost 2,500 decks already. That's not bad, but I thought it was going to go in a ton more. And again, I think it's probably because people are saying, oh, well, you want to put this in like a 5-color deck where you're going to be getting maximum value out of it. But again, even in just a 2-color deck, I think this is pretty good. Any 2-color spell that I'm casting in my deck is now going to deal 2 damage to any target. That's some pretty fantastic value there that you just get off of casting your spells, which you would be doing anyway. 2 damage kills a lot of creatures. It's also just going to go to your opponent's face if you have no other great targets for it. I think as long as you have a decent amount of multicolored spells in your deck, this just can be great value for you in a commander game. Coming in at number 11, another one of my favorite board wipes from last year. In fact, this one probably is my favorite board wipe from the last year. Corpse Explosion. 1 black and a red sorcery. As an additional cost to cast this spell, exile a creature card from your graveyard. Corpse Explosion deals damage equal to the exiled card's power to each creature and each planeswalker. So there's a bunch of reasons why I like this. First of all, it's 3 mana, so this doesn't have the issue that Hostile Takeover does, where it's kind of expensive for a board wipe. This one's only 3 mana. That's really cheap for a board wipe. I also like it because not only is it hitting those creatures, it's also hitting planeswalkers as well. And I always like my board wipes to be hitting those planeswalkers if that happens to be an issue in a game. But the thing I like most about this is if you're in a Rakdos deck that is just really creature heavy, you're probably going to end up with lots of creatures in your graveyard at some point. You get to choose. That's what I like about it. You look at the board, you see what kind of creatures are there, and you see what kind of creatures you have that you don't want to die, and you pick the power of the creature in your graveyard depending on how much damage you want to deal to each creature, so you can hit the ones that you want and don't hit the ones that you don't want to hit on your side. I really think it's a neat board wipe in the commander format. Again, it's in Rakdos colors, so already a lot of great options for board wipes there. Maybe that's why it doesn't see as much love. It is in 2,300 decks. That's not bad. Just for me, this is one of my favorites from the last year, and I would like to see it more in the commander format. Coming in at number 10, Roboran Mercenaries. 3 and a white human mercenary, 3/4 with vigilance. Roboran Mercenaries has all activated abilities of all legendary creatures you control. This is one of the reasons why I decided to make this video. I actually did mention this in my best commander cards of the year, and this is only currently in 426 decks on EDH Rec. Again, essentially that's nothing, right? And as I see here, this is in Kelsey the Plague decks, which is pretty good. It's also in Mariki Rebarrett decks. Pretty fantastic fit there. This is just one of those cards that I think got buried. I had someone mention on that video, yeah, I totally forgot about this card just because we had so many cards that came out last year. I am putting up as many commanders that I can that have activated abilities that are obviously in white. This would be a good fit. Just look at your decks. If you got a commander that is white that has an activated ability, you don't always want to be copying it, but a lot of times you do. And having another creature on the battlefield that can use your commander's ability again can be really, really handy. This card for sure can go in a lot more decks, I think. Coming in at number 9, another one of my favorites from the last year, Eldritch Pact. This is just a fun, interesting card in a commander game, I think. 6 and a black sorcery. Target player draws X cards and loses X life, where X is the number of cards in their graveyard. Currently in 2,800 decks. That's not bad, but this is one of those cards that I thought people would go after. It's doing one of those effects that people really like. Of course, it's drawing a ton of cards. That's always good, but why I really loved this card and why I was so high on it when it came out in Baldur's Gate is because you can use it on your opponents as well, right? This is a pretty good draw option later in the game. 7 mana is a lot. Obviously, that's when you're going to cast it, and when you do cast it, you're probably going to have a fair amount of cards in your graveyard, maybe like 10. So this is 7 mana, draw 10 10 cards. Pretty darn good. I mean, you're losing the life, but that's like every black card draw effect, obviously. Also, though, it can be a win con. In just any deck at all, later in the game, you draw this off the top, you look at your opponents, and you have an opponent who's got 30 cards in their graveyard and has less than 30 life. This is, that player loses the game. That's pretty good, right? In a mill strategy where you are milling your opponents and filling your graveyards, it's extra good. So I think this card should go in all of those decks. And of course, there's a lot more than 2,800 mill decks in the format. And this card seems like a phenomenal fit in all of those because, again, this is just target player loses the game, right? Really fantastic, fun card in a commander game. I'm surprised it's not in more decks. Coming in at number 8, Spiteful Repossession. Another one that I'm really surprised. I thought people would definitely go after this one, and they didn't. 4 and a red sorcery. Spiteful Repossession deals damage to each opponent who controls more lands than you, equal to the difference. That's pretty good. Then create a number of treasure tokens equal to the damage dealt this way. Currently only in 2,300 decks. I thought for sure people would be going after this card. It fits in a lot of strategies. First of all, it just fits in any mono red deck because chances are you're probably going to have at least a couple of opponents with more lands than you. Red isn't great with the ramping, right? It's probably the worst color. In fact, I would say it's easily the worst color for that. This doesn't care about the treasure tokens you're making or the mana rocks or anything else that red would typically do for their ramping. It only cares about the lands. So it's just going to hit all your opponents for a bunch of damage. And then on top of that, it's giving you all those treasure tokens. So again, fits in all those treasure token decks. I thought for sure this was a card that was just going to slot easily into everyone out there who has treasure token decks in red already. And we know there's a bunch of those, right? There's a whole bunch of commanders in red that themselves are just dealing with treasure tokens. And this seems like a phenomenal fit there. This is giving you treasure tokens equal to the damage dealt this way. So if I deal 2 damage to one opponent, 1 damage to another, and 2 to another, this is giving me 5 treasure tokens, right? It's equal to the total damage dealt this way. 5 mana, get 5 treasure tokens seems pretty good, but also if you're up against a deck that is ramping like crazy, this can really get out of hand. I'm really surprised this card's not in more decks. Coming in at number 7, Hiditsugo Consumes All. 1 black and a red enchantment saga. Chapter 1, destroy each non-land permanent with mana value 1 or less. That's an ability that works nicely in a whole lot of decks. Again, it's a really, really good token hate card. I mean, it gets rid of the Soul Rings and the Mana Crypts and a lot of stuff like that as well. But particularly, I think this card works great against token strategies. Number 2, exile all graveyards. There's something that you probably want to be doing in every deck, I guess, unless you're in a graveyard deck yourself. So maybe this is not a great fit in a Rakdos deck that is doing the graveyard theme. But then you exile it and return it to the battlefield transformed under your control. And this is why I thought a lot of people would be going after this card, because the backside is so interesting. It is an enchantment creature, Ogre Shaman 3/3 with trample. Whenever Vessel of All Consuming deals damage, put a +1/+1 counter on it. That's pretty good. Whenever Vessel of All Consuming deals damage to a player, if it has dealt 10 or more damage to that player this turn, they lose the game. Pretty interesting way to knock out a player. I think it's not going to happen a lot. You could build around this. I mean, obviously this is going to fit in certain themes a lot better, but I think this card could fit in any deck because, first of all, the stuff on the front is great, and then the backside just becomes a neat little creature that gets bigger as you deal damage. Of course, your opponents are probably going to use removal on it, but you've already gotten the value off of the front side, so if they waste one of the removal spells on this guy before it gets too big and it can one-shot them, I'm okay with that, right? Really great value I'm getting off of this card. Only in 1,800 decks currently. I thought for sure people were going to go after this one. Again, I don't know if there's too many specific decks that it fits, but I think you could put it in almost any Rakdos deck where you don't want to be destroying your own treasure tokens or exiling your own graveyard. Other than that, it seems like a great fit. Coming in at number 6, Endless Detour. Green, white, and a blue instant. The owner of target spell, non-land permanent or card in a graveyard puts it on top or bottom of their library. I love this card. It is so unique, so interesting. Was one of my favorite cards from New Capenna. Interestingly enough, it's actually not my favorite removal spell from the last year. There's another card on this list that's even higher than this that doesn't see nearly enough play. This is currently in 2,600 decks, and it's one of those cards that I think, because the wording is so weird, maybe it puts people off of it where they're not exactly sure where they should use it. The owner of target spell, of course, means you can use it on yourself as well. That is relevant. You can use it to just stop an opponent if they're about to win the game, right? They cast that game-winning spell. Of course, they get to choose, so likely they're going to put it on top of their library, but at least it buys you a turn. But of course, the most obvious way to use this is just putting non-land permanents on top or bottom of their owner's libraries. It's hitting any non-land permanent, which is always great for your removal spells. Again, you can use that part on yourself if you want to save something. My opponent's about to kill my commander. I don't want to have to recast it again. It's really expensive. 3 mana, I put it on top of my library, so I just draw it again. It's just such a versatile card, and maybe even too versatile that it kind of puts people off of it. I think it could definitely see more play though. Coming in at number 5, maybe my favorite card from last year, Spirit Sister's Call. I really love this card a lot. I even love the art. 3 white and a black enchantment. At the beginning of your end step, choose target permanent card in your graveyard. You may sacrifice a permanent that shares a card type with the chosen card. If you do, return the chosen card from your graveyard to the battlefield, and it gains if this permanent would leave the battlefield, exile it instead of putting it anywhere else. This card's currently only in a little over 1,600 decks. Again, that's almost nothing, and I think it can fit in so many decks. I thought for sure, okay, this card's for sure going to go in all those Orzhov Aristocrats decks. I thought for sure it would do that because Orzhov Aristocrats decks tend to have lots of little token creatures lying around, and so I have a 1/1 creature that I want to sacrifice anyway. I sacrifice it and then get an actual creature back out of my graveyard. That seems pretty good, right? Even if that creature is just a Blood Artist or some small creature that I just really want to get back because it works great in my deck, but also it works with any permanent type. So if I'm in an enchantment theme, right? If you're in an enchantment deck that is black and white, now I can sacrifice enchantments to get back other enchantments. If I'm in an artifact theme that is black and white, and there's actually quite a bit of those, now I can be sacrificing artifacts to get those bigger artifacts back out of my graveyard, or whatever artifact I just really want out of my graveyard. And of course, I think it's extra good in any graveyard strategy because I can just throw stuff in my graveyard and then immediately on my end step get it back by sacrificing something that I don't really need that much. And again, the permanent type really plays into it a lot here, where if you have an artifact creature, for example, I can sacrifice my sad robot. That's both an artifact and a creature, so I can get either an artifact or a creature out of my graveyard. I just think this is such a fantastic, versatile card. I thought for sure it was going to slot into a whole bunch of decks that are already doing similar themes to this, and nobody really seems to be playing it at all. Maybe it was forgotten about, maybe it got buried. Give it a shot in your deck. It might work out great for you. Coming in at number 4, Structural Assault. 3 red sorcery. Destroy all artifacts. Then Structural Assault deals damage to each creature equal to the number of artifacts that were put into the graveyards from the battlefield this turn. This I thought was gonna be the most popular board wipe from last year. It's not necessarily my favorite, but I thought for sure everyone would be playing it. First of all, it's mono red, so it fits in a lot more decks. Also, it is destroying both artifacts and killing creatures. You don't see that very often, right? Especially in mono red. This is a mono red board wipe that is going to get rid of all the artifacts, so right away that's already decent, but on top of that, it's going to get rid of a bunch of creatures as well. Only currently in 2,800 decks. I thought for sure this would be up like 10, 12, 20,000 maybe. I thought everyone would be playing this. To me, this is one of the best mono red board wipes in the format now, and I know what puts people off of it a lot is you don't have a ton of control. You know, if I want to destroy all the creatures in play, if there's not a lot of artifacts, that's not super great. I think where this is extra good is again in that treasure token theme, because it's looking at the amount of artifacts that goes into the graveyard. One of the things that I heard people say about this card, which is not correct, is, oh, well, if your opponent has a bunch of treasure tokens, they'll just sacrifice them in the response, and so that won't count towards your structural assault. No, your structural assault is looking for the amount of artifacts that were put into the graveyard from the battlefield this turn. Doesn't have to be from your structural assault. So if your opponent is doing that in response, okay, fine. They're still getting rid of their treasure tokens and it's still counting towards the amount of damage that is dealt. But also, again, if you're in that treasure token theme, I actually think this is a pretty good fit. I can sacrifice all my treasure tokens to cast my structural assault, and then that's going to be included in the amount of damage that is dealt there. So I really think this is one of the best mono red board wipes we have in the entire format now, and I'm really surprised it's not in a lot more decks. Coming in at number 3, we had a lot of great removal last year, and surprisingly, I didn't really talk about enough of them on my best cards from the year. This is one card that I can't believe I missed when talking about my best cards from the year, because it is my favorite removal spell from last year. It's one of my favorite removal spells I've ever seen, and I desperately want to make a Jund deck just so I can use this card. Unleash the Inferno. 1 black, red, and a green instant. Unleash the Inferno deals 7 damage to target creature or planeswalker Walker. When it deals excess damage this way, destroy target artifact or enchantment an opponent controls with mana value less than or equal to the amount of excess damage. I love this card. It is currently only in 1,500 or so decks on EDH Rec. Just the Jund decks alone, I think I would put this in any Jund deck. And I just did my color combinations video, so I know there is over 43,000 Jund decks in the Commander format, and I think this could go in any of them because obviously removal fits in any strategy. It is instant speed removal, which is what you're always looking for, and you're always looking for removal that is versatile, and that's what I love about this card. And again, maybe there's so much going on here that it sort of puts people off of it. It's not just destroy target artifact or destroy target creature. It's doing it in a lot of different ways. If you look at this card though, first of all, it's probably going to kill any creature you're going to find in a game. There's very few creatures in a Commander game that aren't going to die to 7 damage. It also, though, hits Planeswalkers. So this is destroy a creature, a Planeswalker, destroy an artifact, destroy an enchantment. So it is likely you're going to get at least 2 of these things. You know, if you have a problematic Planeswalker, I can get the Planeswalker off the table and then also hit my opponent's Soul Ring as well because I only needed to deal 6 damage. If I really, really want to get my opponent's Rhystic Study off the table, now all I have to do is look for a creature that has a 4 toughness or less that I want to get off the table. Maybe I don't really care about it that much, but heck, why not? I'll kill that opponent's creature, and then also I get to hit the Rhystic Study as well, because that's fitting the excess amount of damage done. As far as mana value goes, I love this card. It is such a fantastic removal spell. I can't believe it's only in 1,500 decks. Again, I think it could go in any Jund deck at the very least, because it's hitting all those different permanent types and it's doing it in a very interesting way as well. Probably my favorite removal spell from last year. Coming in at number 2, Altar of Ball. 1 and a black artifact, but it also is an adventure sorcery. Bone Offering, 2 and a black, create a tapped 4/1 black skeleton creature token with menace. That's pretty good. Just getting extra value out of the card. The important part here though is the actual artifact. Pay 2 and a black and tap, exile a creature you control, return target creature card from your graveyard to the battlefield, activate only as a sorcery. This is currently in 3,800 decks. That's pretty good. It is the most popular card that I'm talking about on this list today, but for me, this card is so good that it just goes in way more decks than it is currently in. It, in my opinion, is one of the best recursion effects we have in the entire format now. In fact, it might be the best repeatable recursion effect we have in the entire format now. I think this goes in so many decks. Obviously, it is going in the recursion themes. It's also, again, probably going in all those token / aristocrats themes as well, because it says exile a creature you control. It doesn't care about non-tokens. So now I can sacrifice that 1/1 token I have, or maybe that zombie token I have, and get any creature out of the graveyard. At the very least, I have a, I don't know, Wilhelm the Rotcleaver deck. There's a commander that is spitting out tokens every turn. Someone kills my commander even. Now I can just leave my commander in the graveyard and then sacrifice one of those zombie tokens to put my commander back into play and then get another token off my commander, right? Just seems like great value, really fantastic repeatable recursion. Again, I think it's probably the best option we have in the entire format for repeatable recursion. If I have a recursion deck, for sure I am putting this in there. And if I have a commander that's black, that's spitting out tokens, I also think it's a fantastic fit, because at the very least, it's a way to get my commander back repeatedly. Shocked that this card is not in more commander decks. Far and away though, the most shocking for me, and one of the reasons why I decided to make this list, was Pyre, Sledge, Arsonist coming in at number 1. This card and Robrand Mercenary, those were the 2 cards where I was like shocked at how little decks that they were in. 2 and a red, Vyashino Shaman 2/2. Tap. Pay 1 and tap. Pyre, Sledge, Arsonist deals X damage to any target, where X is the number of permanents you sacrificed this turn. Soon as I saw this card, I was like, wow, that automatically slots into so many decks that already exist. This card is only in 844 decks. That was shocking to me when I saw that. Not even 1,000 decks. Again, that's almost nothing. Even if you just put this in the treasure token decks, right? This is sacrificing any permanent, guys. So any treasure token deck, and there's a lot of treasure token commanders out there in red already. How is this not an auto include? I sacrificed 3 treasures to do what I would normally do anyway. I've now sacrificed 3 permanents this turn. I pay 1 and tap my Pyre, Sledge, Arsonist to deal 3 damage to any target. That seems pretty good, right? Prosper Tomebound, one of the most popular commanders in the entire format. Currently over 11,000 decks on EDH Rec. This seems like a phenomenal fit there. Doesn't it? I think it does. 11,000 decks, 844 decks. That's a pretty big discrepancy there, right? So any of those treasure token themed decks, for which there are a lot in the format now, this seems like a great fit. Red decks where you are sacrificing permanents of any kind, this seems like a phenomenal include. You're just getting free value off of what you would normally be doing in your deck anyway. I'm sacrificing a bunch of stuff anyway. Now I just have to pay 1 and tap and I get to throw a bunch of damage around. I can't believe this card's not in more decks. Again, this is one of those cards that when I first saw it, I'm like, well, that's going to be in like 10,000 decks by the end of the year for sure. 844. Couldn't believe that when I saw it. It's one of the reasons why I decided to make this video. So there you go. Just a bunch of cards that I thought were really fantastic from last year. And of course, we got a lot of fantastic cards from last year because of course we got a lot of cards period from last year. And a lot of it is flying under the radar for people, right? I'm sure there's a lot of people that will see this. They'll go, oh, Pyre, Sledge, Arsonist. I totally forgot about that card because we were just getting piled on with all this content last year. Now this is a nice reminder for you, right? This is a combination of, these are cards that I think are really great that maybe people should be playing a little more, but also maybe they just got buried by all this other stuff that is happening and you just forgot about them. I know I forgot about a lot of stuff last year as well. So this is a little reminder for you guys to maybe give a look-see at some of these cards and see if they fit in some of your decks that you already have. And if you are thinking of purchasing any of these cards, I have a TCG Player link. It is in the description below. Give it a click. It helps support the channel, but that is it for today. And thanks for tuning in.